side.
Been a while, mate.
So are we gone?
Aye,
We're in?
fuck it. Aye,
We're back
mate.
in the room?
Aye, we're back.
Literally back in the room. Aye. It's no bad, mate. Like, glad to be recording again on something other than Zoom. No offence to Zoom. It's probably been
I know, mate.
a lifesaver for people's sanity over the course of the last 6 months or so, including mine. But
Aye,
it's nice
absolutely.
to actually like look somebody in the eye in person and have a conversation for once.
Aye, for sure. I looked back at my WhatsApp messages. I mean, obviously, obviously to me and you, I've been made redundant. Probably one of the only guys at this time that is actually fucking happy about getting made redundant. But
Aye, you've been waiting a while, haven't you?
delighted all the same. But I was looking back through, went out for a watch night out on Saturday night, and I don't know why, man. I was just pissed, and I was looking back through the group chat messages, and there was a message for me in like February explaining what Zoom was to somebody, and I was thinking, how rapid does shit just go wild, man? That now it's probably one of the most recognisable brands on the planet, and I know even fucking 3-4 months ago I was having to explain to somebody it's like Skype, except you can record and it's just a bit better and blah blah blah. But aye, man, it's good to
It
like.
would have been handy had we had it in the first few weeks when I was recording on a gaming headset and sounding like fucking Darth Vader.
Exactly, mate. But I think like that was something that, do you know, I was like having a think about this no so long ago, maybe a couple of days ago, that when it came to like podcasts and shit, it used to be a very like elitist sort of thing where I would be like, and we need the mics, we need the setup. I mean, obviously we're in an improved production setup now with like the lights and stuff that I've got, but we need the mics, the setup needs to be like sat down. And I think like genuinely one of the best things for like especially Scottish podcasters where we don't have London, or if you're known LA or New York or somewhere where you're getting like these big massive high profile people coming through the door, I think this is probably going to be liberating for a lot of it, where you find you can attract people to come in video call you that wouldn't normally do it. I know we had done it maybe once or twice and we kind of like don't really like that, but I think getting there that hurdle of just accepting it, getting used to it.
Yeah, we were connecting like phones to Bluetooth and all the rest of it in the early days, weren't we?
Mm-hmm. But I think it'll be liberating for people, and I think it'll mean that podcasts in Scotland and maybe even just further afield anywhere in the world will start to get better quality guests. You know,
I think there's a couple of good examples, not necessarily, but well, I suppose there is a couple of good ones. I guess obviously, Derek at DW ended up with Amanda Knox, which was, you know, congratulations on an absolutely massive
fucking
one
right
there. Like, but more in general, like guys like, you know, 23 Universe and You Call That Radio. I mean, these are guys who we've had a bit of interaction with ourselves. They're gone 5 nights a week because they can just log in on Zoom and stuff like that. And it's been, I think Mark McGowan at You Call That Radio was celebrating like 100 episodes during lockdown. Now, I mean, had we tried anything like that, I would have went like literally insane.
Aye,
and
we're running out of shit to talk about.
Apart from you know, except that I went partially insane during most of this. I think, to be honest with you, as probably the case with a lot of folk. You know what I mean? Like, but there's definitely been like seismic kind of like overnight changes because like the podcasting scene was already getting like explosive in terms of like the amount of people getting involved, and like I think when folks seen that they could knock it together on, you know, their iPad with Zoom and, you know, GarageBand, like, there's definitely a lot of folk that jumped in. I think it was a good thing for a lot of like stand-ups and stuff like that, you know what I mean? The people that maybe dusted off old podcasts or like started new ones where they were able to actually maybe like trial some material and like keep themselves busy and whatever else. So there's definitely been like some really positive changes in like the overall scene. A lot more competition, unfortunately, now the way.
I suppose, but I mean, it's good to see, like you're saying, it's good to see people just actually just taking the plunge and starting their own podcasts, just doing their own stuff because they can do it. Like we're all kind of like on an even sort of pegging. If you can't attract people to come in and sit down in front of you, then you can just get them on video call. Just saying maybe a wee bit more competition, but I mean, for me, like part of my post redundancy plan is to be a podcast producer, and I have done it before in the past. I actually did Derek's first 3 or 4 episodes, helped him get it off the ground, and I think what became apparent to him was that you don't need to become, I mean, the boys in Motherwell, you don't need to be coming through to Glasgow to do a podcast, you could just do it yourself type thing, which is amazing. Obviously, like what we've got planned in the coming sort of months to hopefully get off the ground is going to be something that's a wee bit more like a high quality podcast
Aye.
than people jumping on Zoom, and that's no shade to people that are going to continue to do it on Zoom. But
absolutely not.
we're looking to do more, like, I would say, like the Open Gold guys are doing in a venue, but with like a sort of professional sound and thingy production. But suppose we can talk a wee bit more about that like in the coming thingies. But aye, absolutely, man. I think it's great to see a lot of podcasts get off the ground and a lot of people just bite the bullet on things that they. And I think that's something actually that's across the board. It's not just with podcasts. I think you've seen a lot of people, because they've had so much time. And I suppose this comes back to like what we talk about with universal basic income, where people are actually like, I'm going to get my art page started, I'm going to get this off the ground, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And I suppose like what I would like to see is that people continue to do these passion projects when they go back to work, because these are the things that actually keep you sane. Do you know what I mean?
So I think is the one thing I would hope in that respect is that folk are able to keep it moving, because I think as we began our journey, and as you say, interacted with a few other folk about it, like keeping it going in your own time when you actually have jobs is the difficult part. You know, we've seen a lot of folk who have had great ideas and great formats, and they've got like 5-6 episodes in and not been able to maintain it just because of their commitments. So I think that'll be the big balancing act for the people that have kicked off during the lockdown, is how they maintain it and keep it going, and hopefully, you know, as many of them as possible are able to do that, because I think Glasgow does have a pretty like vibrant like podcasting scene at the moment. I remember days where all you could ever get was like Celtic and Rangers football podcasts, you know what I mean? Like, but it goes everywhere from mainstream all the way down to, as you say, somebody sitting in their bedroom with an iPad now, you know what I mean? Like, so the more variety and the more people coming to the table, you know, the better it is for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. That's it, man. But I mean, suppose we could just talk about like how shit's been for us since. I mean, when was the last time we did an episode with just me and you? It's been
probably in the early weeks of lockdown. We were still trying to figure out what else to do.
I had a lot of enthusiasm for what was going to happen during lockdown and what was going to come out the other side of it. And I think like reflecting back on that, not a lot of it's actually happened. Do you know what I mean?
I'm kind of in the same boat. For me, lockdown has been a really kind of quite odd experience in that it's very akin to like previous instances I've had absence where long-term mental health issues have adjusted to medication and treatment and whatever else in the past, where I would have been off work for 2, 3, 4 months at a time. This is obviously years ago. I'm much more in control now that that's not the case. But, you know, getting the furlough and realising, I'll go for like 3, 4 weeks, and now we're into like month 5 or 6 and I'm still in the process of being furloughed. That length of time has been comparable. Unfortunately for me, anytime I've been in that long-term absence scenario, I've always like hunkered down and just tried to ride it out and survive. And I think to an extent, maybe that's partially what I've done a lot. I know some of the gaps we've had in recent weeks have just been about the fact that I've completely not been engaged in really very much of what's been going on. So, you know, something to work on for me there. But I think I'm not alone in that fact that, you know, lockdown came round and we almost as much as we knew there was a real serious thing there. Some of us thought, a wee break will be nice. And, you know, we'll just, sit with Netflix and the PlayStation and it'll be cool. But as it's progressed, it's become, for me, very much a slog. Like where, you know, motivation and that are just stuff that, have escaped me at times. You know what I mean? And I think when I look around on social media, I've seen quite a lot of that. And fortunately for me, this isn't the first time I've been on this road, but for a lot of other folk finding themselves in similar situations who have maybe never had any sort of long-term absence, and are now, you know, folk that have worked all their lives finding themselves idle for half a year. And, you know what I mean? A lot of folk out there don't know what to do with themselves. And I think we could be harsh on each other and be like, oh, we thought we were going to do so many positive things at the start of this, but it didn't pan out. But I don't know, man. I'm trying to cut myself some slack, so I would probably encourage other people to do the same.
Aye, for sure. Do you think it would have been easier for you if... I mean, I can remember us talking sort of, no, sceptically, I don't know, like, sort of predicting that this might be a wee bit longer than what they told us. Do you think it would have been easier on people mentally if they had got the honest, like, because back when they locked down, right, I remember them saying, no, this is every 3 weeks. We're going to review this every 3 weeks, and there were some sort of sections of media and just general people on socials going, well, if you look at the places that are like coming out to the other side at that time, it's going to be mill at 3 months here, and it's ended up we're at month 5, like about to head into month 6.
I mean, my current status is that I could be anywhere up until the end of October. So I mean, I'm in a situation where I was going off expecting to be 3-4 weeks, and by the end of this could be 7 months.
Right. Do you think it would have been easier on you mentally if you could have been told, look, this is months, no weeks?
I will review it every 3 weeks, but it's going to be at least 6. It's going to be at least 8 weeks. You know what I mean? Like, maybe, I don't know. Like, for me, it's been muscle memory. The minute my, sort of psyche or whatever recognised this, malaise, this sort of idleness, like, as I say, I've just went into like survival mode and just like bedded down and been like, right, just get to the end of it. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know how much of that would have changed, because I don't think I would have ever had anything else to compare it to anyway, having no been long-term unemployed in my life or any of these types of things. So I think it would have always been my point of reference. So I'm not sure how. I think that's why I'm trying not to give myself as much stick as I maybe normally would for, an activity and an action, is that I didn't have anything else to like base the approach on. And I think, as I say, there's a lot of folk in that scenario where this is something that they've never had to really sort of consider, and we're all just kind of like fumbling about in the dark trying to find something that works for us, I think.
Aye, man. I think what's wild about it as well is that thinking back on March, and it had like very much like a feeling of like we're all in this together. But then seeing as the weeks and months have progressed, we're all going through the same thing by and large. Like, obviously, like there's mad variables in there, but we're all going through. Or there's a vast majority of people, or a lot of people, are going through what you're talking about. Like, I mean, I've never had any more than 3 weeks off work since I was.
There's a reason that people only take 2 week holidays, because after 3 weeks you're starting to be like, what the fuck is happening here? I need to go and do something.
But I've not had that any longer than that off work, and probably since I was about 13. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I'm not even like lying.
We're going to take the paper runs now.
If we're going to like getting up some of the fucking paper runs that I did on a Sunday are hard on the fucking job I've been doing for the past 15 years. So we're going to like sit there and engage that. But since I've been about 13-year-old, I've steady had a job. I went 3 weeks unemployed in between walking at McDonald's and getting a Christmas temp job in Virgin Megastore, because I told them to ram it when they withdrew my holidays to go to Benidorm one year, and I was like, fuck this, like you can stick your job up your arse, and walked out. I had a 3 week period where I was doing like temp work in Superdrug. So even that 3 weeks unemployment that I've experienced at like 19, I've still been making some cash, I've still been keeping my mind going, and it's very different. But we've all kind of experienced this like sort of pause button being put, and I'm finding it. I've actually found it tough.
That's a good way to look at the pause button.
I've found it tough coming out the other side of it, and I've not even had time to sit down and really like have a good long think about it. Last week was for sure the toughest week I've had in lockdown. Like I experienced anxiety last week that I've not experienced in about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
I did have. I'm going through redundancy, and obviously, like, even though I'm saying I'm absolutely delighted that I'm getting paid off, I'm getting a good payoff.
It's still a process, man.
I've got doubt, like, sort of coming in and going, because I'm being offered things where people are phoning my mobile, and when I'm picking up, they're like, you need to go and talk to this guy. They're saying that they might want you going down. I'm just like, look, I've made my mind up and gonna just stop. Just leave me. I've got my number. I'm leaving on the 14th of August. And that's the way that I want it to go. I've made my decision. Stop trying to tempt me back. We're like, we'll give you this, we'll give you that. But there's still a wee bit of sort of doubt creeping in. And then, like, my uncle had took into hospital for an operation Monday, passed away on the Wednesday. There's a lot of like wee tiny things that are like coming in that are making me feel a tiny bit anxious. But the main anxiety that I've got that really hit me was I went for my works night out on Saturday. And I just thought, I get steaming. Like, I went out for 2 pints at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 pints and some grub. And the first pint went down so well, the second pint, and then the menu came out, and I was like, fuck the food. And it was like shots of fucking tequila and everything at like 5 o'clock. And then I was sitting outside at Charing Cross. I smoked 20 fags, which, like, early course of the night, which is just brutal. And I woke up and I was just like thinking about starting about slouch at fucking midnight and thinking, man, this virus is still going on, and I've went out and I'm so aware of everything that's going on about me. on a normal day-to-day basis, live in the city centre, get my mask on and all that. But honestly, man, like after about 2.5 drinks, all that just went to the wall. And I was just like, fuck it. I'm on it, man.
You've been there, 10, 15 years. Like, there's also a need to acknowledge, like, you know, the ending of something that has been a massive part of your life. You know what I mean? Like,
aye. I came home and burst into tears.
Aye.
I came home, Sharon was pure, oh, blah, 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 trying to talk to me. And I was just sitting on the bed and just burst into tears. And she was like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, what? This is a big deal. This is a big deal for me. Like, this has been a huge part of my life. I'm 37-year-old and I've worked there for 15 years. It's mammoth, you know what I mean? It's the biggest, even bigger than any relationship I've had outside of my parents and my sister.
Yep. We don't have a microcosm of that, you know what I mean? Like, this is something that's happening, you know, so far, maybe hundreds of thousands of times up and down the UK as people go through the same process, you know what I mean? Like, so this is something that is definitely going to be a part of what we need to deal with and get on top of as, you know, quote unquote life gets back to normal.
I've got a plan as well. Like, this is a mental thing, is that it's causing anxiety. So it's really gave me like, well, I'm not going to mention any names of people, but I've been doing counselling clients. I think people might have even remembered that back at the start of lockdown, I put out like a call to action for people, and I've managed to build up, like, I think I've counselled 15 people in lockdown. 5 of them have left because I've helped them. And the feedback I'm getting is amazing, but that has really kept me going.
Aye.
That has really fucking kept me going, dude. Like, see, without that, like, I felt that anxiety last week. And then the Monday and the Tuesday, I postponed 2 counselling calls because I wasn't feeling great. And then on the Wednesday, I forced myself to do it. I was like, no, I need to go and do this today, man. Because one of the guys, it's his last day off of work. And he's getting some anxiety about working. So I really like feel this, like, I need to help this guy. So I decided, right, I'll do 2 on the Wednesday. And see, as soon as I done the 2 counselling calls, I felt fucking great. And I was like, fuck, man. But I see, without that, without helping people, without counselling and doing therapy with people, I don't know where I'd have went, because it was only like a week that I took off it because my uncle helped my mum, and honestly I felt really fucking shite for it, man. So for people that are out there, I mean, I seen James Docherty on Twitter saying his PTSD get triggered by lockdown and that he had to take a few weeks off, and Graham Undrunk at the start of lockdown, he put a thing on on Twitter saying, I'm going to take a break, and I DM'd him and he was saying it's because of lockdown and I'll be back and don't worry type thing. But aye, man, there's so much going on, there's so much anxiety, there's so much pressure, people getting asked to go back to work and they don't feel comfortable, redundancies on the horizon. And I just, to say to everybody, like, we're all in this together. Like, we are absolutely in this together. The amount of communicating that me and you have done early course of lockdown has absolutely been helped because we've got the podcast, but just general talking, and even as soon as the lockdown was lifted, we couldn't get an episode, but you were coming here, I was coming to you, and like that's I think this is, we need to all come together now, and we need to like get back that sentiment that we had back at the start of March, where it's like, we're on this together. Now we're going back. Now things are starting to creep in day by day, bit by bit. We need to get that back again, where we're like, right, let's support each other through this massive change.
I think in the coming weeks, hopefully people will see that in some of the episodes we're going to be putting together, because we are going to be talking, you know, further sort of violence reduction and how people can look at themselves and manage themselves a bit better. And we'll also have a really interesting charity coming in to talk about, you know, how to deal with, how young people should be dealing with bereavement better and stuff like that. Not necessarily like sexy subjects, but I think like when lockdown started and we talked to guys like Better Than Zero and whatnot about how people can protect themselves financially and in the job market, and some of the other things along those lines we're looking to do down the line. Like, this is a similar kind of thing where I think it's probably an important time to actually maybe have a bit of a wider conversation about how we feel, how we manage ourselves, and, you know, how we allow ourselves to handle, you know, traumatic situations, kind of like the one that we're all in just now.
You
know what I mean?
Absolutely. So what's been like piquing your interest recently? As far as like sort of, I mean, we haven't called politics in a wee while, have we?
No, well, I mean, I think in the first couple of weeks of lockdown, we kind of were aiming to do a bit of UK roundup, bit of US roundup, and some, you know, Scottish stuff. In terms of the UK side of things, like, since we last spoke about this, like, the 2 words that most sort of amply come to mind to me are like corruption and incompetence. And I say that in the sense that at the beginning of lockdown, you looked at the Tory government in Westminster flapping and flailing about, and it just looked like they were completely incompetent. You know what I mean? Like, scrambling for any sort of lie or half-truth that would buy them, an extra day's worth of piece in the press and stuff like that. But as they've kind of got to grips with it, or, well, got to grips with it is probably the wrong way to describe it, as they've started to spot the ways in which them and their pals can make money, the incompetence seems to have lessened in a certain respect to me, and like, things that probably could be classified as corruption have started to creep in. The Trace and Track app is the big one. There was something like a £250 million contract that went to one of Dominic Cummings' underlings, only for him to spend 12 million quid and come back with an app that didn't work. Refused app support for Google and Apple, who have software that works on this. And then when they went to put their own app together, went to Google and Apple and basically asked for their code and were told, basically, get to fuck.
And quite rightfully, would you say rightfully?
Who knows? But at the same time, you can't say we don't want your product, we want your code. You know what I mean? Like, especially when there's 250 million quid potential on the table, 12 million of that's already gone, and then you look across the water at Ireland and they put together an app for fucking €900,000. So I mean, there's PPE contracts that are going to newly founded companies, or companies that have no experience in the field. Like some of them, one of them is like a vending machine operator, like a £5 million PPE contract, and you're like, these are all guys that potentially have links to Tories, or have Tories on their boards and stuff like that. And it's almost as if they've had that 3 or 4 weeks to look around, just manage the public as best they could, and now they're plugging away with how they're going to capitalise, or how their donors and friends are going to capitalise off the back of this, which has been pretty disgusting.
It's just Tories being Tories.
It is, but
it's been so blatant.
This is what's getting me, is that we're almost dealing with two realities at the minute. We're dealing with the reality that people in the world can actually see on the streets, in the shops, at their jobs, as we've been talking, and then we've got the reality that the Tory government want us to believe is there, and the two of them are completely different things. And you see it in even his recent trip to Scotland, where he's talking about making positive cases for the union, and he's flying up to North one afternoon to talk to Tories, to be back down the road in London for bedtime, having unceremoniously binned the Scottish branch office leader in between times, you know what I mean? That's no, there's what they're saying and what they're doing are sort of separated from each other at the minute. Yeah. You're just like, how has this been allowed anymore? I mean, it's absolutely scandalous.
It kind of started out about as good as I've ever seen a modern Tory, because you get into these, you see people on Twitter, or you see people on social media getting into these arguments about they're not conservatives. This is the definition of a conservative.
Yeah.
But this is the conservatives that we're dealing with, right? So when we talk about the Tories and conservative, we'll talk about Boris and his pals, and it started out
disaster capitalists, basically.
I suppose you could look at it like that. It started out in March, kind of about as good as I've seen a Tory ever be, where you're saying they were flapping and flailing, and they didn't really know how to respond. So their actual response was about as clear and concise as any politics is in my recollection, where they were having daily updates, they were showing you the graphs, they had the chief medical officer, the chief science officer there, they did the furlough scheme, they promised that it would be unlimited and that there would be this isn't even the end of it. They said all the right things, they did all the right things. In my eyes, kind of because they were panicking, and also they didn't want panic to.
And they also tried to avoid things like furlough and all the good stuff that they're getting credit for, because these were implemented only when it became apparent that there was absolutely no other option but to implement them. You know what I mean? So they did have a bit of gun to their head in a lot of respects, but at the same time, they still made the right decision. When you look at things in America, they know the right decision is to make similar choices and put money in people's hands to keep food on tables. They've got 43 million Americans that are in risk of eviction, but yet the Senate is like, we're not going to use enough fucking penny. So there is other places now that are not making those decisions, even with the gun to their head. You know what I mean? So there is a level of credit for making it, but it's there's caveats, man.
I suppose. They locked us down, even though it was a week late. They did furlough. They like I said, they were doing the updates, but as it was almost bit by bit, you just see it go. It was as the data started to go against them, then the graph stopped.
Yeah.
As the message for the Prime Minister or the whatever fucking representative that they wheeled out that day who could ever be bothered wasn't matching up with what the Chief Medical and Science Officer was saying, then they went. And then the whole thing's just went now.
Yep.
In Scotland, we've still got Nicola Sturgeon, I think, maybe twice a week, is it, that she's coming out and giving updates?
I'm not entirely sure. I think there was a kick-up about it being daily, but I don't know if they've changed it from daily to something else at this moment in time. Like, they were saying that in Scotland she'd made it a part of political broadcast, and you're like, this is back to that quote where you're not really making a political point by showcasing somebody's competency. Like, there's no an agenda to competency, you know what I mean? Like, as much as probably events this week will have thrown a shadow of that with like the SQA stuff and everything, but I'm sure we can get back to that.
We'll touch on that, but it's bit by bit it's just went, and now, like you're saying, they've went back to their party political politics, and they've went back to, like, well, look at Scotland. I mean, by my standards, and obviously, like, there'll be people out there and they'll be like, well, you're at independence voting, left leaning.
Yeah.
Like, I check all the boxes for saying that I think the performance in Scotland, outside of like some very, very like disturbing stuff like the care home shit.
Care homes definitely need to be looked at everywhere in the UK.
But we've performed pretty well. I think we were that far behind London that our lockdown was probably appropriate, but maybe England could have went a week or two before us even. But we've done stuff at the right time, and we're now sitting in what, and I'm sure we'll talk about Aberdeen, but
there are spikes.
We're sitting in what, day 13 with no deaths, or like no new deaths, and a bit new cases coming up.
I think new cases are starting to definitely spike.
Absolutely, but I think we've done about as well as what we could have expected.
I think we're justified in saying that the Scottish Government were right not to ease restrictions in lockstep with Westminster. I think that is undeniable, even based on the limited evidence we've got so far. But there has obviously been pressure both sides of the border for businesses, and we get it, you know what I mean? Like, but I think Scotland were definitely better placed given the reluctance to ease as quickly as England did.
Aye, absolutely. But they're still trying to point score with certain aspects of this. Like they're saying, they've even reduced themselves to like point scoring with the fact that she's doing an update and saying this is like their party political broadcast that's turning into and because the results are positive, you're getting this like, oh, look at all the yesers and look at all the SNP like just jumping on this, and you're like, no, but I think we've got a genuine case to go, we've done no too bad. As we say, outside there
has been some of the lunatic fringe online who have been turning it almost into like a scoreboard, and that's no acceptable. We're not going to make a case for independence by slagging people off because they had more deaths than us or more illnesses than us. So there's definitely a line that some have crossed, but in general, the disconnect for reality has very much been on the unionist side. I mean, he's left this week after, 5-6 months, Jackson Carlaw, and frankly...
Don't even know who the guy is. Like, that's how irrelevant the guy is. I thought he was a troll, like, for weeks.
I fucking see the back of him, because he's what he was bringing to the table was swivel-eyed fucking nonsense. You know what I mean? Like, he's one of these guys, like, how the Tories dealt with track and trace and with tests and all these types of things by just constant disinformation. Carlaw was very much in that bracket where, he was very much in lockstep with that tactic to just talk about what's actually happening and just speak to your base. So I'm glad that he's getting to fuck. Douglas Ross, who knows? We'll wait and see. I don't think it'll make a lot of difference at this point.
That video that's been doing the rounds, and I suppose on stuff like this that isn't COVID related, you're like, we can politicise the sort of 60-second answer video that he did for YouTube.
Yeah.
And they were saying what would be the first thing that you do if you were leader, or what would be your top priority. And he was like, tougher measures on travelling gypsies. And you're like, what?
That's like, the most important thing.
That's the most important thing that you can think of right now. Like, we're coming out the tail end of a global pandemic. The second wave might be on the horizon.
Aye.
Economic disaster, like job losses like we've never seen before. And the one thing that this dickhead comes away with is tougher measures for gypsy travellers. What I suppose, like, apologise for quoting the guy verbatim, but like, I genuinely, genuinely disgusted with that.
Oh, aye, absolutely.
Like, absolute, what a fucking arsehole. And
I look forward to him maybe one day meeting Nicola Sturgeon in the chamber, because that's if he gets elected.
I thought he was an MP.
He is, but he needs to be obviously an MSP to
be the leader in Scotland.
Well, not necessarily be the leader in Scotland, but it's hard to be the Tory leader in Scotland.
No, absolutely. You know but I didn't know they could appoint him the leader of the Tories with him just being an MP.
So I think generally you would expect some sort of internal election. But I think given how unceremoniously Carl Law will have been binned when Johnson made his flying visit last week. I mean, you've seen the picture and it was like Johnson, Douglas Ross, and some other Tory, and then there was like three guys like socially distanced behind them against a wall, and in the very far corner was Jackson Carlo, and you're like, that's the British Prime Minister in Scotland with the leader of the Scottish Party hiding in the back of the photo. It was actually quite comical, so it was like, so it can't be well thought anywhere.
It's like the playground, isn't it? It's like politics is like the playground. I'm gutted that what's his face gets get binned for the sexual assault charge, because he was right cosy with fucking Boris, and he might have been on me a shout at getting the leader of the Scottish Tories, the guy from Aberdeen, which he's.
Oh right, aye.
We DM'd him and tried to get him on, and he declined. Don't have my phone. Can't have my phone. The power of the laptop.
The internet.
But I would have loved to have seen this guy coming up against Nicola Sturgeon, because he was an absolute clown. But I think what we've seen has just been Tories being Tories. I mean, there's, like you're saying, there's been chat companies created and dissolved within a week and taking contracts for whatever COVID-related thing.
Yep.
And we were talking about potentially there being like an anti-profiteering thing come in. No chance of that.
Oh, absolutely not. No, not at all. I think as well, if you want to talk about like the Scottish context and, you know, Tories being Tories and that sort of disconnect with reality, like, I think, especially in consideration with Aberdeen, like the guy's smart, which I'm sure is a misnomer after this comment, was that Nicola Sturgeon was locking Aberdeen down to distract for the fact that people were unhappy with the exam results. And like, I think the Labour Party are on a sugary peg in Scotland as it is. I don't know that the right thing to be doing is to be like engaging senior members of your party in this, you know, country to talk such utter nonsense.
It's like levels of like, it's like almost trying to like create conspiracy theories, which is like pure trumping. Do you know what I mean? It's like, was that the right take? Is that the right tact? It was Ross Thompson, the guy's name was.
I was going to say Thompson, but I wasn't sure.
But to think that Aberdeen's getting locked down, I mean, it's 2 weeks since the pubs opened. Like, let's have a bit of common sense about you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And no, like, jump to silly shit like fucking they're doing this to distract. I mean, the SQA scandal in itself has been, I mean, I've not really seen too much detail other than some numbers about disproportion, like Martin Dunner results, but I don't even know why they did it.
So the thinking, as I understand it, is that without the ability to successfully hold exams during COVID, teachers were asked to mark, you know, in accordance with prelims and with like coursework and behaviour and attendance and such and such. In the particular demographics that are being like disputed or, you know, sort of brought to the public, it seems to be the disparity between sort of higher and lower affluence areas and the schools that are in them. So in the way that teachers marked them may have been over generous, and had they went, or what Nicola Sturgeon said at a press conference was that had they went with the results as teachers gave them, pupils in, you know, quote unquote deprived areas or whatever it is would have attained hires at like 85%, when the year before the average was like 60. So they were saying like teachers have potentially been over generous based on coursework and blah blah blah. So what they did was they took previous data on results for previous years and used them in a moderation process to bring the figures back into something that is, like what they've said, more credible, and people have been after that, because as a result students for lower income areas have been disproportionately affected by the markdown because they were the ones disproportionately affected by the potential markup.
Right.
Now, year on year, the figures for higher attainment this year, after moderation, was 65%. So that's still like a 5% jump in attainment. And that's probably quite a sizable figure, to be honest with you, if it was a normal year. But people are saying, and they are right in saying that students with disadvantaged areas, so to speak, have been marked down in higher numbers because of previous year's averages and stuff like that.
Right.
I'm not really sure what else they could do. I mean, Jeanette Finlay made the suggestion that on Twitter that they should have copied the colleges and said that no harm, that apply a no harm principle that says if you got a B in your prelim, your overall result will be no less than a B. Whereas actually what was happening was students that get A's in their prelims were getting C's in their results.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
which doesn't make sense. Just like it's a weird. So even if you were to just go, look, we trust the teachers, and this year has had probably. I mean, can you imagine what it's like at 15, 16 having to go through what we've been talking about like less than an hour ago about how difficult it's been for us to cope with mentally, and that these people have. There's kids in many respects, but the teenagers are like having to cope with that and with like all the negativity, like job prospects and people waiting to go and do university, record levels of mental health problems. Why could we not just give a year of 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds a buy? For fuck's sake, give them the mark they got in their prelim.
Aye. So I do, again, like in principle, can I agree that that's a valid question to ask? The problem is that we're looking at it, and we have to look at it through the sort of lens of COVID, because it's happening right now, but unlike furlough where I'm out of work now, they're giving me money for now. Like, your education has to go with you the rest of your life, and it has to be the same education that the guy in the year before you go, and it has to be the same education that the guy in the year after you go.
Right.
And like, going, let's give everybody a buy this year, means that next year, or people who were there the year before, might be disadvantaged in terms of their ability to apply for courses because somebody got an extra 2 A's that they shouldn't have got, and somebody else missed out on a course because the balance is off in terms of. So obviously that 5% jump could be quite a big figure. I don't know what the year-on-year figures are, you know what I mean? But it's certainly probably more credible than 25-30% jump. You know what I mean? And that's the thing, is that. So I'm with you in the sense that fairness should have said, look, you get a raw deal, let's help you out a wee bit like we've done in other areas of society. But this is one of the very few areas of society where the permeation of it is
widespread.
You know what I mean? It'll affect people on either side of the year that go, you know, an easy ride. Not that I'm saying that's what they got, I'm just saying quote unquote easy ride, you know what I mean? So it's a tough balancing act. I liked the no harm principle that Jeanette talked about. Beyond that, I didn't see a lot of other suggestions.
The no harm would be that if you get a B, like you said,
in your prelim,
but they do bring down the average. So if you get a B in your prelim and you got an A, they'll take you down to a B.
Yeah, you'll get no less than a B. Right. So you'll not be negatively impacted.
That would be it.
Seems like a bit of a common sense one, and Jeanette is a really experienced educator herself, you know what I mean? So I would, without knowing the ins and outs of it myself, I'd be inclined to trust her opinion, and it seemed reasonable, you know what I mean? But beyond that suggestion, I didn't see a hell of a lot of other suggestions for folk as to how to manage the discrepancy, you know what I mean? So it is a tough one. I think they were going to get absolutely hammered either way, because had they walked out and went, guys, 85% of students in impoverished and deprived areas passed their hires, it's a 25% jump on last year, the press would have just been like, you are having a fucking laugh.
Yeah, you caught between a rock and a hard place for it, really.
5% to 25%, they were getting nailed either way, I reckon. That's not to say that they've no handled it well. There is probably areas where they could have done a lot better. Like,
what will be interesting to see is what happens in England. So if they follow the same sort of precedent that's been set by the SNP, then the unionists are kind of like, where do they go for there? That's when stuff gets interesting, and usually you find they just contradict themselves.
So they have different education systems in England in terms of,
and what they plan to do with the exams.
I've got absolutely no idea at the minute. Right. But I'm sure we'll find out. There'll be similarities, I'd imagine, but I think there is a, different policy making for education either side of the border, you know what I mean? So I can't imagine they'll be likely to copy and paste what's just been absolutely rinsed, but who knows? They must have, or their equivalent to the SQA must have contingencies in place at this point. Man. You know what I mean? But it's one of them where I just don't think they could win. You know what I mean?
Do you think there's anything like that bad about what they've done? I mean, when I kind of scanned it last night, and I didn't read it enough that I could explain it to anybody.
And I might not be explaining it right. I'm just going on my impression. You know what I mean?
Like, I was kind of like saying that to Sharon, where I was like, "Well, what should they have done?" And she was like, "I've getting well." When I explained this is my understanding of what's happened, I was like, "What's the alternative?" She's like, "I don't know." Aye. And I was like, "Well, that's exactly it." People are going, "Oh, you can't do that," and it's like, "Well, what do we do? Like, we don't know."
Aye.
But I think like the way that Jeanette's suggestion seems like there's one end of the spectrum that people the stance that I took there, which I've actually changed to think that they should have went down the Jeanette's suggestion. Absolutely. Don't give them any lower than their prelim, then whatever.
It's actually based on a level of merit, at least at that point. Surely even if there is moderation involved.
Surely some of the exams still exist. You could have moderated the exams, like the prelims.
So I think, as we were saying, when we talk about trying to touch on what's been going on in the UK, what's been going on in Scotland, what's been going on in America, and I think, I've ranted about Tories and, their corruption and incompetence enough at this point. I'm going to give myself an aneurysm. I think we should maybe lighten the mood by talking about the ongoing race war in America.
Fuck's sake. Aye, man. I mean, obviously we had 2 galas for BLM Scotland on, which got a lot of good feedback and stuff, but don't know,
really enjoyable guy to talk to.
Aye, absolutely. I think the protests that were happening here, and some of the protests that we've seen happening in America has just been, they're night and day.
Yeah,
absolute night and day. But I mean, I don't even know what to make it. I genuinely don't know what to make it. I think there's been absolutely legitimate Black Lives Matter in the wake of George Floyd being murdered. There's been people that have been out there legitimately looking for change.
Yep.
And there's another sort of section that are just looking to just stir the shit. I don't know where they come from. I mean, there's a lot of rabbit holes about it, about what the source of them and
George Soros' army.
Exactly, Antifa and that sort of chat. But I genuinely don't have that much in it. Just looking at it and pure, what the fuck is going on out there?
Aye.
I don't think we're even getting to tell the full story about some of the shit that will be happening.
Aye, I mean, it's been a sort of, as it has been everywhere else, a turbulent 6 months out there. I think in terms of the protests, as we were saying with Barrington, that, when you look at Watts in LA, when you look at Minnesota and all the rest of it, it's something that's been coming back around time and time again because, change is promised and never delivered. And I think for the people who are out in the Black Lives Matter movement protesting on that ongoing basis, I can absolutely empathise with why, because, every time they step off the gas, it gives politicians the excuse to start dismissing their demands again. So I think at this point they might feel they need to keep the pressure up. And if it wasn't for the fact that they were up against a crackpot president, they might have actually made some headway. I mean, I think one of the biggest flashpoints at the minute is Portland, where against the requests of the Portland governor and senators and, sort of state governance mechanisms, has sent in the federal troops, which is, again, pretty authoritarian, to say the least, when the governor's out on the TV going, "We don't want your troops," and he's sending them in anyway. You can see what his ongoing response to this is going to be. So it needs to be met in some respect. So I've kind of looked at the Portland one in the last week or two and seen quite a really interesting evolution. A guy was reporting video threads, the various sort of skirmishes and clashes and stuff like that.
Right.
And there was a really cool story that came out of it. As federal police were being sent in to smash up protests, the moms the American MOM, the moms formed a law with their yellow t-shirts, and all the moms of Portland joined arms in front of the police to stop the police for assaulting the hangar, which I thought was actually really quite cool, seeing these wee old dears being like,
Did it work?
Well, partially because then the federal tactics evolved to, drones and stuff like that, to get a look at people. Well, not to attack people, but to start like facial recognition, mapping people, looking for suspects, etc., etc. To which the Portland protesters responded with laser pens. So every time a drone went over them, this just like, Pink Floyd-esque like light show just goes up in the sky at this drone so that it can't make head nor tail of what's going on, which I thought was, again, a nice sort of evolution for the protesters to adapt to, what was being put against them. And the best one by far was that the feds then started showering tear gas in to the crowds.
Nice.
And that's not the best, but obviously that's, horrific when you're talking about grannies and peaceful protesters. But what I loved was the response to it, because the next night, all the same people were back in the same place ready to protest again, but this time they brought leaf blowers. So there's this like amazing picture of the feds showering gas canisters into this crowd and guys stoning with leaf blowers, and the cloud of gas is almost perfectly encapsulated in the area that the federal police are stoning.
Oh, what? So man, that's awesome.
There's just been this like pure, almost like Looney Tunes, like kind of like escalation for like grannies to leaf blowers, and you're just like, this is how you deal with them. This is how you make them look ridiculous and unnecessary, and no engage in the violence. And I'd love to see a lot more of that, because if they're going to be increasingly sending federal presence into these cities to like quell discontent, people are going to have to be on their toes exactly like they are in Portland. But,
aye, man, absolutely.
The rest of the place is a bit of powder keg, though. I think
their
election that Trump's trying to put off, that even Republicans laughed at the notion. He's slagged off paper ballots to then go back on them and say that they're actually legitimate. He's claiming all sorts of election fraud before a ballot's even been posted. He's completely lost his shit. I mean, at one point he was actually stoning at a press conference talking about how nobody likes him, and you're like, he's like completely lost his shit.
He's definitely a Rangers fan. Nobody likes him. He doesn't give a fuck.
I think he's also one of their sponsors.
He is actually. Fuck's sake, the golf course. Like the interview that he did with HBO like last week, or like even a couple of days ago, last few days, just shows you like the insanity. Like this is how this guy has made his money. This is what this guy's done his full life. It made him a reality TV star. He's a ignorant idiot. He's sitting with fucking stats about how America's number one in the amount of tests. So if you look at the testing that we've done, and it's almost like
how they've had less people die than the rest of the world. You're like, we've got less people than who? The world.
The world. And in comparison to the world, it's like you don't know that you're in the world. Or is he in the world?
I don't think he is.
But yeah, I think he's lost it at this point.
There's talk of like a 20-point gap in the polls to Biden, and Biden is like the colour beige taking human form. You know what I mean? Like,
his VP choice is going to be very, very interesting. I mean, we were hedging our bets back in March. We were saying that hopefully he could pick somebody like Yang, but it looks more like it's going to be a Kamala Harris or
somebody a bit more mainstream.
But it'll be very interesting to see.
He is Mr. Mainstream. You know what I mean? Like, he'll still look to give himself a bit of flavour with either a woman or somebody of colour or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, because that's going to be his, centrist nod to the left of the party with these AOCs and, Ilmar Omars and all that kind of stuff. Like, they're rising in popularity by the day, and, their ideas are not just restricted to guys like Bernie Sanders anymore. So, like, the Democrat Party in there has to have a nod, but that's all it's going to be, because they are too like the Republicans and how they're set up. You know what I mean? Like, it's never going to be anything more than lip service in a lot of respects.
Absolutely,
but that's what the vice presidency is. You know what I mean? It's like, pick somebody for a part of the country where you don't do well and put them on your ticket so that you do better in that part of the country. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, it's literally like Biden's just, whoever comes in as VP's got to use that guy as a puppet. Like, have you seen any of the footage of him in the last like couple of days where he's like, there's a video where the guy, he's almost like doesn't know where he is.
Aye, there's.
They're like, what the fuck is going on?
Aye. But in a sense, it's going to be good old fashioned gaffes that we get from him. You know what I mean? Like, where, you know, if he makes it to president, the worst we really need to worry about is him sounding a bit daft every now and again. You know what I mean? Like, maybe being a wee bit too touchy feely and cuddles, which he's also notorious for. But aye, when you compare him, like, his campaign slogan at this point is basically, "I am not Donald Trump." You know what I mean? Like, that's really the only campaign pledge he needs to make at this point, and he should win. You know what I mean? Like, but aye, even, you know, there's been quite a spike in like Republicans against Trump. I've followed a few accounts on Twitter and stuff like that where even Republicans are like, right, the price is too high. Like, they've been in their wee partisan trench for the last 3.5 years, 4 years, and, you know, they've, you know, for the good of the party, and now they're like, well, hold on a minute, this guy could make them unelectable all across the country for the next decade. You know what I mean? Like, so interesting. The funny one I think's quite is going to be a laugh, or the next big laugh, in the kind of like Armando Iannucci sense, is the Trump accepting the Republican nomination. So because he's, you know, rallies have been curtailed and his public appearances have been limited, and like the only place he gets the adulation that he requires to get by on a day-to-day basis is by holding these big massive fucking rallies.
Like half the places are like empty and shit.
Well, I mean, he famously got trolled by K-pop fans a couple of months ago, where they went on and bought so many tickets, or purchased, or, you know, whatever, signed up for so many tickets online that Trump thought he was going to speak to like 1 million people in this, you know, whatever 40,000 seater stadium, to the point where he put a stage up outside, booked Nigel Farage, of all people, to come and talk at it.
Oh, was he there?
He was there exclusively to talk at this outdoor stage. And then when they got there, the car park was empty and there was like 1,500 people or whatever waiting to get in, and the whole thing was a complete disaster. But this was like K-pop fans deliberately trolling Trump, so it was amazing. But now, because he can't get that, his campaign guys are looking for any opportunity to put him in that type of situation, because that's where he gets to be his best version of himself as far as they're concerned. And as a result, they're going to try and basically hijack the accepting the nomination of the Republican Party, because he's a sitting president. I kind of think of a time, if it's ever happened, that somebody's primaried a sitting president. So he is the candidate. There's no fanfare involved in it. There's going to be like it should be him in a rose garden going, "I accepted the nomination today, guys, cheers." But what he wants is like a football stadium full of people, and, you know, all this nonsense that will allow him to actually like feed his own ego, and like, the Republican establishment are like, get you to fuck. So that one's going to be interesting. So it is like where he's going to have to try and seek out these scenarios to validate his own existence when nobody anywhere wants to play along with him.
The Republican Party are going to end up finding themselves in a similar sort of place where Labour find themselves in this country, where they're going to need to do a hell of a fucking lot to get elected again after this. This has been...
They have the benefit of gerrymandering all across the country and stuff like that. So it's slightly harder in that respect, but like in terms of credibility, it's a fair comparison. You know what I mean? But the actual mathematics that they've put in place over the last 10 years are quite hard to overcome in a lot of places, especially at local levels. You know what I mean? But they should be completely toxic for the next 20 years after this. But you're talking about a two-party system. You know what I mean? Like, the pendulum always swings back sooner or later.
Aye, it's suppose just the right candidate to get in. Aye. So, like, what have you been watching recently? Like, what's been on the...
Well, I mean, it's been a bit of a weird one because there's not really much in the way of new stuff out. There's no new movies, not a lot of new TV, because a lot of shit, you know, got suspended when the lockdown kicked in across the world. But like a lot of other folk online, like, I've been rewatching stuff. There seems to be like a few conversations I've had with folk where they've went back to old shows that they loved, and, you know, there's maybe been that like comfort and nostalgia and like not having to really engage with something that you already know. Like, that's definitely been something I've been doing. I burned through like 30 Rock a couple of weeks ago, like 7 seasons of 30 Rock.
That's one of your like all-time favourites, isn't it?
Aye, but again, it was just this pure comforting like light world that Tina Fey creates, that I'm like, this is the escapism that I need right now. You know what I mean? Like, I got a wee bit braver as lockdown went on and like started watching some Fringe. quite enjoyed that. Didn't age as well as I remember, to be fair.
I was going to ask about 30 Rock, like, how's it aged?
Aye, it's
all right.
It's good. I still think it's excellent. Like, I just, you know, there should be a law passed in America that means that Tina Fey just has to write like 30-minute sitcoms for the rest of her life. Just chain her to a desk somewhere, and I'd be quite happy. You know what I mean? Like, aye, it's just zany is what you think. Like the skit comedy, something we don't really get as much in the UK as maybe in America. So, you know, the Saturday Night Live thing, the comparison in 30 Rock's there, but I don't think it's something that people really engage with. So having it all fleshed out the way she has is definitely like it's
I've
definitely
never
aged
ever
well.
watched that.
It is zany, and it's pure, almost popcorn, you know, bubblegummy American comedy. You know what I mean? Like, but it is well written and well put together. But then I went down the J.J. Abrams hole, watched Fringe. I've been watching Alias. The one that stood out to me was like folk who are watching classic shit for the first time. That's been enjoyable to see people talk about. There was one that was fucking Mark Kermode, you know, one of the most renowned like TV and film critics in the UK, was tweeting about how he'd just finished watching The Wire for the first time, and I was like, dude, how have you never seen The Wire? Like,
I've never seen The Wire.
It's amazing. Like, it's one of the ones like Sopranos and West Wing that if you've never watched any of the three of them, like, just pick one and start. You know what I mean? Like, I
started rewatching The Sopranos last 10 days ago, and I'm at like, this is what I hate about rewatching stuff. I'm at like episode 7 of season 2, and like 10 days I've watched a full season and a half of like The Sopranos, and just, I mean, I think there must be something in that psychology, or like just pure comfort, because there is something pure comforting when like the theme tune comes on. You're just like pure right bedding in. But I need to watch The Wire. I've watched The West Wing and I've watched The Sopranos. This will be like the 4th or 5th time I've watched through Sopranos. But I watched through Friends as well, start to finish. Parks and Rec.
Which is 30 Rock territory, isn't it? It was weird, nice wee bouncy, happy 30-minute sitcoms. Like I did Community at one point. I'd never watched Community before. That was cool as well.
But I'm getting seriously into The Sopranos again. Like, it's so good. After watching the Mafia documentary on Netflix, I can't even remember what it's called.
The recent one, Mafia versus New York or something like that.
Aye, is it Dirt City or something like that? It's called.
I can't remember. I think it was actually called Fear City.
Fear City.
That's the one.
Aye, after watching that and then starting to watch The Sopranos.
That was insane, like the actual control that the mob had over New York in like the 70s. I mean, I knew that there was like rackets in like every walk of life, but when you're seeing them actually go, no, like garments, meat, like concrete, like, you know, everything was run by the mob until we actually went, right, get used to fuck.
Simmer down. This is what I was talking to somebody about this, and I was saying to them, like, they overstepped the mark. Like, they had it good. They could have just went legit. They had control us so much. They could have done what Trump did and just legitimised everything and just stopped killing and stopped the violence and stopped the drugs and stopped, because they had control of all the construction. And they were building you. I mean, the amount of money that they made in the 70s and 80s.
Yep.
It's and the tens of billions, probably, the amount of cash that flowed through that city.
Would that thing say there was 8 concrete companies in Manhattan or operating in Manhattan, and 5 of them were run by the mob? And you're like, think about how much concrete went into building Manhattan, and you're like, that's like one of the pure instant like licenses to print money that I would have never thought of in a million years. You know what I mean? Like, but
absolutely.
What does everybody need? Everybody needs
concrete.
There's
a scene in The Sopranos where when he goes back to Italy and somebody lets off a firecracker, and like the woman like runs up, and the big guy Furio like sparks her out, and they're like battering the wee guy. And I was saying to Sean, that's what America was like. Look at what like Tony Soprano's like thinking, this is what I want, because this is like the good old days. He's like, pure yes, get me these guys out of America. I was like, New York used to be like that. Like, if people complained, they get a fucking slap, and the police, nothing to do with me, like drove away, walked away. And that is literally like, The Sopranos is like a continuation of watching like what was Giuliani and that team of people like wrapping up and going, nay, marry this. But Faye, what you're talking like the 40s, the 50s, the 20s, even when
started in the 20s.
Do you know what I mean?
That had like the 60s to 80s.
Parts of, like, people used to say that Times Square was like prostitutes and pimps and shit, and like
go there.
Drug dealers, and
nowadays it's like the pure
tourist attraction.
First stop in New York. I mean? The Wire in that respect, like, is kind of like comparable. I've seen The Sopranos, loved it, but there's a real like grown up level of writing and like storytelling involved in it, and like I think the testament to The Sopranos is that there are some like really unlikable characters in it.
Oh my god!
Like, you root for every single one of them. You want them to succeed. You want them to get away with that shit. You want them, and like The Wire's got that in pure spades as well. Like characters like Omar in that, where the guy's essentially like a 90s like ghetto cowboy. So he is like, he's gay. He's like openly gay. Like he's, you know, they're rinsing drug dealers for their stashes and stuff like that. And there's just the thing about The Wire that's different to your average cop show is that it's no the story of a precinct, it's no the story of a police officer, it's no the story of a drug dealer. Like across the entire 5 seasons, it's like the story of the city of Baltimore, where like the first season focuses largely on the police, but like the second season, the story's largely based out in the ports, and then in the third season, it's largely in like a kind of political sphere, and all these stories and characters are interwoven with each other as it builds and grows, but like the actual main character of The Wire is essentially the city of Baltimore, and like the level of writing in it is just off the scale. Like I did struggle in the first couple of attempts to watch it with like the language, because you know there's accents and like speech patterns that I was just like pure, I just can't relate to this to start with. But I think once I get by the first couple of episodes and like got my ear in and got to, you know, where the threads were and where they were moving, like I couldn't put it down. It's like, again, it's up there with Sopranos.
I've watched the first 2 episodes of The Wire 3 times and never get past the second episode, so I might just force myself.
This is the issue that I had with it, was the first couple of times I tried it, I was like, you know, this is...
Game of Thrones was like that for me, where people were like, Game of Thrones for ages, and I was like, right, I'm going to need to go back and start. I think I started watching it like season 5, and I went back and I watched the first 2 or 3 episodes of Game of Thrones like 4 or 5 times, and I think it was Richie that was like, dude, like, just keep going. I was like, right, cool. And then you get like 7 episodes in and you're like, pure fuck, right?
I can live with it if it's like 2 or 3 episodes. Like, say something goes, it takes 2 or 3 episodes to get going, I'm in. The reason I've never watched something like Breaking Bad, which will obviously maybe send people mental, is that people were like, oh, like season 3 gets amazing. You know, I'm not watching 2.5 seasons or something before it gets good. You know what I mean? Like, come on now. Like, so that was the one that always put me off. I know I should always go back and watch it, but
I've never seen it either.
Of the big ones that everybody raves about, I get through the first season and was like, I don't really want to watch this guy die of cancer while his wife's been a bitch.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. I've watched the first season of Breaking Bad twice. And I can't get past it. Maybe just start it at season 2. Just be like, I know what happens in the first season. I'm not going to start it again. I'll just start it at season 2 and just see what happens. But I think like I'm going to make a conscious effort to ramp down the amount of TV that I'm watching. Man, it's getting like,
I've had to break it up a bit with gaming. Just because of the amount of time I've got. There's only so much gardening and walking that you can do when you're locked down, or when, you know, it eases and, you know, you've still got the way at home and all these other things. So I've definitely been keeping my brain engaged with like puzzly games. I went back through like the Batman Arkham games. I've been absolutely loving Jedi Fallen Order, like the storyline and like the combat system and everything's like really engaging. So it is like, so running about with a lightsaber and like chopping shit up has been fucking at least 6 weeks in my lockdown. But
sounds good.
You need to watch in terms of the telly, because there has been times where I've just been, as you say, hunkered down and just let that whole day pass. Watch a full season of something in one sitting and being like, pure, right, okay, hold on. You know what I mean? So, variety.
Will we just wrap it up there then?
I think so, mate.
We've covered a fair amount, eh?
We've got plenty, right?
Aye, man.
Good.
It's been good talking to you, man, especially getting back in.
Definitely. It's been a long time. It's
finding this strange, actually. Surreal, I think, a wee bit. But
it is.
We'll have our first guest in at the weekend, which will be good. And hopefully we can just get back to normal, really, isn't it, with it, man?
I mean,
as much as possible.
Anybody that we're talking to or we're going to be talking to, if they want the remote, then we'll do the remote. It's not the end of the world, but hopefully we'll do it.
You'll never reach the surface, you live underground. Sky fire comes around when the steel ring falls to the ground. There is panic on the streets, a blackened sea full of shuffling feet. Sky fire, can't you see? You can try but you won't break me. The hope that keeps it all alive is burning bright, and I won't back out. It's day to day, night to night. We have no choice who gets to roll the dice. You'll never reach the surface, you live underground. Sky fire comes around when the steel ring falls to the ground. There is panic on the streets, a blackened sea full of shuffling feet. Sky fire, can't you see? You can try but you won't break me. Sky fire comes around when the steel ring falls to the ground. There is panic on the streets, a blackened sea full of shuffling feet. Sky fire, can't you see? You can try but you won't break me.